Revenge with Karen.
The air in the boardroom smelled like fear and lemon furniture polish. It's a scent I've known for 20 years in the hospitality game, usually right before a hotel chain goes belly up or a chef gets caught snorting lines off the prep station. But this time, the stench was coming from my own side of the mahogany table. Robert, the CEO I had practically carried on my back since the 2008 crash, wouldn't look me in the eye. He was too busy swirling the ice in his crystal tumbler, staring at the condensation like it held the secrets to the universe. Across from him sat Brooke, 24 years old, wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car, and possessing the business acumen of a wet paper towel. She was scrolling on her phone, the artificial light illuminating a face that had never known the word no. "Alina, we feel the company needs a fresher perspective," Robert finally mumbled, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "Brooke has some innovative ideas about synergy and digital-first hospitality landscapes." "Synergy?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. I didn't shout. In my line of work, if you have to shout, you've already lost control of the room. "Robert, last week Brooke suggested we replace the concierge staff at the inpatient care properties with iPads to gamify the check-in experience. Deal with high-end luxury estates and boutique hotels. Our clients don't want to gamify anything. They want a human being who knows how to fold a pocket square and get a stain out of silk at 3 a.m. Brooke finally looked up. Her eyes were dead sharks swimming in a sea of entitlement. "See, Daddy, this is what I mean. Alina is so analog. We're pivoting to a disruption model." I almost laughed. Disruption model. It sounded like something she read on a LinkedIn influencer's post while waiting for her oat milk latte. Before I continue detailing how I was gutted like a fish in a suit, do me a quick favor. If you love watching corporate karma unfold, hit follow and upvote. Because trust me, the petty levels in this story are about to skyrocket, and it really helps the team keep these stories coming. "The merger with NeoStay is happening," Alina, Robert said, finally finding a spine, albeit a crooked one. "And part of their condition is a restructuring of the executive board. We're going to have to let you go, effective immediately." It wasn't the firing that stung. It was the erasure. I had built this firm's reputation brick by brick. I was the one who smoothed over the scandal at the Palmer House. I was the one who secured the contract for the governor's ball 3 years running. And now, it was being traded in for generic disruption strategy led by a girl whose hardest day of work involved choosing a filter for her brunch photo. "I see," I said, standing up. I smoothed the skirt of my charcoal suit. "No wrinkles. Never let them see the wrinkles. And my equity, buyout," Brooke chirped, sounding bored. "Pennies on the dollar, technically, since the merger dilutes the previous stock options." Legal drew it up. "It's all in the packet." She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It stopped inches from my hand. I didn't open it. I knew what was inside. A check that would look big to a layman, but was an insult to a partner. A non-disclosure agreement thick enough to choke a horse. And a non-compete clause that practically banned me from entering a hotel lobby in the state of Illinois for 2 years. "You're making a mistake, Robert," I said, ignoring Brooke entirely. "Not because you're firing me, because you're letting a child fly the plane." "Watch it, Alina," Brooke snapped, her voice losing that fake corporate sheen and revealing the spoiled brat underneath. "You're obsolete. Take the severance and go knit something." I walked out of that office with nothing but my purse and my dignity. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral march, but my mind was already racing. They thought hospitality was just about table settings and profit margins. Forgot the other side of the coin. Hospitality is about control. It's about anticipating needs before the guest even knows they have them. It's about knowing where the bodies are buried because you're the one who arranged the turn-down service. I didn't go home and cry. I didn't drink a bottle of wine and key Robert's car. I went to my apartment, sat at my glass dining table, and opened my laptop. I wasn't going to compete with them. Non-compete clause said I couldn't work for a competitor. It didn't say I couldn't become the landlord. The rage was there, certainly. It was a cold, hard knot in my chest, tightening every time I thought of Brooke's dismissive wave. "Go knit something." Oh, I was going to knit something all right. I was going to knit a noose out of their own contractual obligations. I spent the first night just staring at the Chicago skyline, lights of the buildings I used to manage twinkling back at me like old friends who had turned their backs. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had heard the news. So sorry, Aliner. End of an era. Let's grab lunch. I ignored them all. I didn't need sympathy. I needed leverage. By 4 a.m., the initial shock had faded, replaced by a crystalline focus. I pulled up the public records for the venues Robert's company, my old company, frequented. I knew their calendar better than they did. I knew the annual Gala for Innovation was coming up in 3 months. It was the social event of the season, the night they patted themselves on the back for existing. And I knew exactly where they were hosting it, the Marshall Room, a historic, crumbling beauty of a venue in downtown Chicago. High ceilings, gold leaf peeling in the corners, and ownership that was notoriously underwater on their loans was the kind of place that looked majestic in low light, but smelled of mildew if you got too close to the velvet curtains. Perfect. Brooke wanted to disrupt the industry. She wanted to play games? Fine. I was about to teach her the first rule of real estate. The person who holds the keys makes the rules. And I was about to buy the biggest set of keys in the city. The soft blacklist is a polite Midwestern way of destroying a career. Nobody explicitly tells you that you're unhireable. There's no memo circulated with your photo and a red X over it. It's much subtler. It's phone calls that go to voicemail and are never returned. It's lunch dates that get rescheduled indefinitely. It's headhunters who suddenly have nothing in your specific vertical right now. Brooke and Robert had done a thorough job. They had painted me as difficult, resistant to change, and burnt out. The tight-knit world of Chicago luxury hospitality, perception is currency, and mine was currently trading at the value of the Venezuelan bolivar. But they made one critical calculation error. They assumed I wanted a job. I didn't want a job. I wanted an empire. I liquidated my 401k. I refinanced my condo. I called in favors from silent partners, old money types who hated the new tech wave just as much as I did, but were too polite to say it in public. I formed a holding company, Ursa Major LLC, named after the bear, because I was about to hibernate and then wake up hungry. My days became a blur of spreadsheets and site visits. I wasn't looking for glamorous hotels. I was looking for distressed assets. I was looking for the veins and arteries of the city's event scene, the catering kitchens, linen supply warehouses, the historic venues that were one bad month away from foreclosure. The Marshall Room was the jewel in the crown of my revenge strategy. I visited it on a rainy Tuesday, posing as a freelance event planner scouting for a wedding. The place was a tragedy of mismanagement. The original 1920s molding was caked in dust. The carpets in the foyer were threadbare. The manager, a sweaty man named Frantic Mr. Henderson, looked like he hadn't slept since the Obama administration. "We have excellent availability," Henderson stammered, wringing his hands. "Very flexible terms. I'm sure you do," I said, running a gloved finger along a windowsill. It came away gray. "But I'm not interested in renting, Mr. Henderson." He blinked, confused. I don't understand. I represent a private investment group interested in acquiring the property. Lock, stock, and barrel, including the debt. Color drained from his face, then rushed back in. He looked like a man who had just been thrown a life preserver in the middle of the Atlantic. Negotiating the sale was like playing poker with a toddler who shows you their cards. They were desperate. The bank was breathing down their necks, threatening to turn the historic ballroom into an Amazon fulfillment center. I came in with a lowball offer that was still higher than bankruptcy. I kept my name off everything. My lawyer, shark named Sarah, who owed me for saving her wedding reception from a hurricane disaster 5 years ago, handled the paperwork. To the sellers, the buyer was just a faceless LLC. While the lawyers haggled, I kept tabs on my old firm. Brooke was all over Instagram, posting stories from the office I used to occupy. She had replaced my mahogany desk with a standing glass one. She had installed a wellness corner with beanbag chairs. And most importantly, had sent out the save the dates for the annual gala. Location, the Marshall Room. I printed out the invitation and taped it to my refrigerator. It was my North Star. The acquisition closed quietly on a Friday afternoon. No champagne, no ribbon cutting, just a wire transfer and a signature. I now owned the venue where Brooke planned to launch her new brand identity. I went to the venue that night, alone. I had the keys. I walked into the empty ballroom, my footsteps echoing on the parquet floor. It was silent, save for the hum of the old HVAC system, which I noted immediately needed a filter change. My inner technician never sleeps. I stood in the center of the room, imagining the tables, the floral arrangements, the pretentious speeches. I wasn't just a landlord now. I was the ghost in the machine. I spent the next weeks quietly upgrading the place, but only the things that mattered for my plan. I fixed the lighting so I could control it remotely. I updated the security camera system so I had eyes in every corner, even the kitchen. I reviewed every single vendor contract attached to the venue, and then I found it, the existing contract for the gala. It had been signed 6 months ago by Mr. Henderson. It was a standard, boilerplate agreement, but buried in the fine print, under the section regarding Code of Conduct, was Clause 14b. Clause 14b. The lessee and their guests agree to adhere to strict standards of conduct towards venue staff and management. Any verbal abuse, harassment, or derogatory behavior towards staff constitutes a material breach of this contract, granting the lessor the immediate right to terminate the event, refuse service, and eject the lessee without refund. It was a clause usually meant to protect waiters from drunk uncles at weddings. It was vague, broad, entirely at the discretion of the lessor. Me. I traced the words with my finger. It was the trapdoor. Now, all I had to do was wait for Brooke to walk onto it. And knowing Brooke, she wouldn't just walk, she would stomp. Ownership changes are funny things. If you do them right, nobody notices until the rent check clears. I kept the existing staff at the marshal room, the waiters, the janitors, the kitchen crew. They were good people mostly, just led by incompetence. Called a meeting with the core team a week after the purchase. I introduced myself simply as the new management consultant. I didn't tell them I owned the building. I told them I was there to optimize operations. They were terrified at first, expecting layoffs. Instead, I gave them all a 10% raise and new uniforms. Black, crisp, tailored. We are elevating the standard, I told them. No more mediocrity. You are the best in the city, and you will dress like it. The loyalty in their eyes was instant. They had been starved for leadership. Then, the requests from Brooke's team started rolling in. Since I was now CC'd on all management emails, I saw the madness firsthand. Brooke didn't communicate through professional channels. She communicated through frantic emails sent at 2 a.m. with subject lines like urgent, vibe shift needed. She wanted to hang aerial acrobats from a ceiling that I knew, for a fact, would support more than a chandelier. She wanted to replace the historic oak bar with a molecular gastronomy hydration station. She wanted the waitstaff to wear body paint instead of shirts. I, acting through my alias E. Vance, Director of Operations, systematically denied the dangerous requests while approving the expensive ones. Regrettably, the ceiling load-bearing capacity cannot support the acrobats. However, can approve the importation of the endangered orchids you requested, provided the insurance waiver is signed. I was letting her hang herself with her own budget. 3 days before the gala, Brooke came for a site visit. I was there, of course. I was in the back office, watching the security feed. I saw her strut in, followed by a gaggle of terrified assistants and Robert, who looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 months. "It smells old in here," Brooke announced, clicking her nose as she stood in the foyer I had just spent $10,000 restoring. "Can we pump in some scent? Like sandalwood and money?" "I'll ask the venue coordinator," an assistant squeaked. "And this lighting," Brooke gestured vaguely at the crystal chandeliers. "It's so, Grandma. Can we put gels on them? Make it neon pink. I want a cyberpunk Gatsby aesthetic." I watched on the monitor, sipping my lukewarm tea. Cyberpunk Gatsby. Phrase alone was enough to make F. Scott Fitzgerald spin in his grave fast enough to power the city grid. "Brooke, honey, maybe we stick to the classic theme?" Robert suggested weakly. The board is expecting the future, Dad," she snapped. She turned to a waiter who was polishing glasses nearby, Miguel, a sweet man who had worked there for 15 years. "Hey, you, less rubbing, more moving. Get these chairs out of here. I want beanbags." Miguel looked confused. "Ma'am, the event is a seated dinner. Did I ask for your opinion?" Brooke scoffed, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they'd detach. "God, help is so hard to find these days. Just do what I say." I leaned closer to the screen. There it was, the disrespect, the casual cruelty. She treated Miguel like furniture. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah, my lawyer. "The Clause 14b addendum fully enforceable in Illinois regarding immediate eviction?" I asked. "Ironclad," Sarah replied. "As long as you have proof of the breach. Witnesses or recording." "I have both," I said, watching Brooke berate Miguel about the thread count of the napkins. "Aliner," Sarah warned, "if you do this, you burn the bridge. You nuke the bridge. You salt the earth where the bridge used to be." "Sarah," I smiled, though no one could see it. I'm not just burning them, I'm charging them admission to watch the fire. The day of the gala arrived. The tension in the air was palpable. My staff now, were on edge. They had dealt with bridezillas before, but Brooke was a special breed of monster. She had already made 2 waitresses cry during setup. I arrived at 4 p.m. I wasn't wearing my usual power suit. I went to the employee locker room. I took off my diamond studs. I pulled my hair back into a severe, invisible bun. I scrubbed my face of makeup. And I put on the uniform. Black trousers, black button-down, black apron. I looked in the mirror. Alina, the executive, was gone. In her place was just another invisible worker bee, another faceless servant for the elite to ignore. My heart was hammering, not with fear, but with adrenaline. This was it, the undercover boss from hell. I walked out into the kitchen, grabbed a tray of water glasses, and merged into the flow of the night. It was showtime. There's a specific kind of invisibility you achieve when you put on a service uniform. You become part of the architecture. People don't look at you. They look through you to see if their drink is coming. I moved through the crowded ballroom, a tray of crystal flutes balanced on my left hand, weaving between the heavy oak tables and the cyberpunk Gatsby neon monstrosities Brooke had insisted on. The room was filled with faces I had known for decades. There was the CFO, Arcus, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. There was Linda from HR, who had processed my severance paperwork without making eye contact, now desperately trying to flag down a canapé tray. They looked right at me, my face, my eyes, and saw nothing. Just a vessel for champagne. It was exhilarating and terrifying. I poured wine. I cleared bread plates. I kept my head down, my posture deferential. "Excuse me, sir." "Right away, ma'am." Voice was a soft drone, stripped of the authority I usually commanded. I made my way toward the head table. This was the danger zone, table 1. Robert sat at the center, looking like a man attending his own execution. Next to him was Brooke, radiating manic energy in a dress that looked like it was made of tinfoil and bad decisions. She was live streaming, holding her phone up high, narrating to her followers. "Hey guys, we are live at the gala. It is giving luxury. It is giving disruption." She panned the camera around the room. I ducked slightly, placing a fresh bottle of sparkling water on the table. "Ugh, finally," Brooke muttered, not looking at me. "I've been parched for like 5 minutes. Service here is tragic, Dad. We need to buy this place and gut it." Robert sighed. "Brooke, please, we're guests." "We're not guests, we're the money," she corrected him, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Without us, this place is just a dusty attic." I filled her glass. My hand was steady as a surgeon's. I wanted to pour it in her lap. I wanted to grab the microphone and recite her incompetence to the board. But I waited. The trap needed to be sprung perfectly. I retreated to the shadows near the kitchen doors, observing. The dinner service began. The salad course, arugula with a deconstructed vinaigrette that Brooke had demanded, which basically meant dry leaves and a dropper of oil. The guests looked confused. I saw Marcus, the CFO, lean over to Brooke. "So, when do we announce the Q3 numbers?" "There, concerning, boring." Brooke sang out, "Tonight is about vision, Marcus. Don't bore me with math, we're pivoting to vibes." I saw Marcus wince. I knew that look. That was the look of a man realizing his stock options were about to become toilet paper. The main course arrived. Filet mignon, medium rare. The kitchen was running like a Swiss watch, my watch. I had personally briefed the head chef to ensure perfection. If things went wrong, they would blame the venue. I needed the venue to be flawless so that the only rot in the room was Brooke. I was assigned to clear table 1. As I approached to take the plates, Brooke was in the middle of a story about her recent spiritual journey to Chelum. She was gesturing wildly with a fork. So the shaman was like, "You have the soul of a warrior queen," she said, flinging a piece of steak fat onto the pristine white tablecloth. It landed with a greasy splat right next to her wine glass. She stopped. She looked at the stain. Then she looked up, not at me, but at me. "You," she snapped, pointing a manicured nail at my chest. I froze. Had she recognized me? Was the game up? "Me, ma'am?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Yes, you. Look at this mess." She pointed to the piece of steak she had just thrown. "This table is disgusting. Can you serve food in a pigsty?" "I apologize, ma'am. I'll clear it immediately." I reached for her plate. "Don't just clear the plate, clean the mess," she shrieked. The room went quiet. The band stopped playing. "God, are you stupid? Do you need a diagram?" I felt the eyes of 300 of Chicago's elite on my back, my old colleagues, my industry rivals. "Brooke, calm down," Robert hissed. "No, Dad, this is what I'm talking about. Standards." She grabbed her wine glass, a heavy red Cabernet, and deliberately tipped it over. The dark liquid pooled across the cloth, dripping onto the floor, splashing onto my black apron. There, she sneered. Now you have something to clean. Chop chop, busgirl. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, a collective gasp held in 300 throats. I looked at the wine dripping down my apron. I looked at Brooke's smug, triumphant face. I looked at Robert, who had buried his face in his hands. It was time. I didn't scramble for a towel. I didn't apologize. I didn't run to get a manager. I slowly reached into my apron pocket and pulled out a crisp, white service cloth. I folded it once, twice, with deliberate, methodical precision. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. I stepped forward. I wiped the spilled wine from the table. I moved with the grace of 20 years in the industry. I absorbed the liquid, wiped the wood, and placed the soiled cloth on my tray. Then I stood up straight. I rolled my shoulders back. I lifted my chin, and I finally looked Brooke in the eye. But I didn't look at her like a server. I looked at her like a CEO. Table 6 is dirty, busgirl. Brooke mocked, sensing the shift in my posture and trying to regain dominance. Did I say you could stand there? Get on your knees and scrub the floor. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Excuse me, Brooke laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. Did the help just say no? Dad, fire her. Fire her right now. Robert looked up, his face pale. He looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time, recognition flickered in his eyes. The hair was different, the clothes were wrong, but the stance, the ice in the veins, he knew that stance. He had seen it across a boardroom table for 2 decades. Alina, he whispered. It was barely audible, but in the silent room, it sounded like a scream. Brooke whipped her head around to her father. Who? What are you talking about? I didn't answer Robert. I kept my eyes on Brooke. You seem confused about the hierarchy here, Brooke. You believe that because you rented the room, you own the people in it. I do own you, she screamed, standing up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. My father's company is paying for this pathetic little party. We are paying your salary. Could buy this whole dump and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. Actually, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room without shouting. You can't. I signaled to the darkness at the edge of the room. The house lights shifted. The spotlight that had been focused on the stage widened to include me. Because this dump, I continued, stepping closer to her, invading her personal space, was sold 3 weeks ago. Brooke blinked. So what? New owner, same trash. New owner, I said, allowing a small, razor-thin smile to grace my lips, is extremely particular about the conduct of her guests, especially regarding Clause 14B of the rental agreement. I reached into the back of my apron, not for a wine key, but for a black envelope. The same kind of black envelope I used to use for VIP invitations. What is this? Brooke scoffed, though her hand trembled slightly as she took it. That, I said, is your eviction notice. Murmurs started. A low rumble of confusion and shock from the guests. You're crazy, Brooke spat. You're just a waitress having a breakdown. Security, get this psycho out of here. She looked around for the security guards. 2 large men in black suits stepped out from the shadows near the kitchen. They walked purposefully toward table 1. Brooke smirked. Finally, drag her out. The guards walked past me. They stopped on either side of Brooke. I'm sorry, Miss Vance, lead guard said to me, ignoring Brooke entirely. Is this the individual causing the disturbance? Brooke's jaw dropped. Miss Vance? Who is Miss Vance? I'm the CEO's daughter. I turned to the guard. Yes, James. This is the individual, and her guest, I gestured to Robert. They are in violation of their contract, abuse of staff, disorderly conduct, destruction of property. I turned back to Brooke. The realization was starting to dawn on her. Puzzle pieces were clicking together. The refusal of her absurd requests, the strict adherence to policy, the voice that sounded hauntingly familiar. I bought this venue yesterday, I lied. It had been weeks, but the dramatic effect was better, and I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, especially little girls who don't know how to hold their liquor. Alina, Robert choked out, standing up. Alina, please, let's talk about this. We're done talking, Robert, I said, my voice dropping to a chill. You wanted disruption. You wanted to shake up the industry. Congratulations. Consider this your disruption. Brooke opened the black envelope. Her fingers fumbled with the wax seal, my personal seal, a bare Ursa Major. She pulled out the single sheet of heavy, cream-colored cardstock. This is an invoice, she stammered, for the full rental fee, plus damages, plus a breach of contract penalty. She looked up, her eyes wide and wet. This is for $50,000. Read the bottom line, Brooke, I said. She looked down. Her lips moved as she read. Immediate termination of event privileges. Guests must vacate premises within 15 minutes. You can't do this. she shrieked, tearing the paper in half. "We have investors here. We have the press." "Oh, I know," I said, glancing over at the reporter from the Chicago Tribune, who was frantically taking notes on his napkin. "That's why I waited until the main course. I wanted to make sure everyone was seated." Robert rounded the table, his hands out in a pleading gesture. "Alina, listen to me. This is excessive. We can settle this. Whatever you want. You want your job back, is that it? You want a consulting fee?" I looked at him with genuine pity. "Robert, do you really think I want to come back to a sinking ship? I don't want a job. I don't want a fee." I took a step back, dressing the room at large. The guests were silent, forks hovering halfway to mouths. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "my apologies for the interruption to your dinner. The venue management has determined that the host of this event has violated the terms of our service. As such, the event is concluded." "No," Brooke screamed. "Sit down. Everyone sit down. She's lying. She's a nobody." However, I continued, ignoring her tantrum. "The kitchen has prepared a lovely dessert, chocolate lava cake. Since the host has forfeited their deposit and paid the penalty fee, the bar is now open on the house. For everyone except the host party." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. They were confused, but they were also entertained. And free alcohol is a powerful motivator. "You," I pointed to Brooke. "And you," I pointed to Robert. "And your executive team, you are leaving. Now. I'm not going anywhere." Brooke grabbed the tablecloth, knuckles white. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said calmly. "I have the deed to the building in my office safe. I have the signed contract with Clause 14B highlighted, and I have video footage of you assaulting a staff member, me, with wine. I also have footage of you calling Miguel a racial slur during setup." That was a bluff. She hadn't used a slur, just general abuse, but in the court of public opinion, accusation was enough to make the air leave the room. Brooke gasped. "I didn't, you liar, did you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do you want us to play the tape for the Tribune?" Brooke looked at the reporter. She looked at the guests, who were now looking at her with open disgust. The cyberpunk Gatsby facade was crumbling. She wasn't the visionary CEO. She was just a mean girl in a foil dress who had pushed the wrong woman. "Dad," she whimpered, her voice small. "Fix it." Robert looked at me. He looked at the ruin of his gala. He looked at his daughter. And for a second, I saw the defeat. He knew he had bet on the wrong horse. He had traded competence for flash, and now the flash was burning the house down. "Let's go, Brooke," Robert said quietly. "What? Let's go, before she calls the police." Robert grabbed her arm. "But my party." "It's not your party anymore," I said. "It's mine." I signaled James, the security guard. "Escort them out. The back exit. We don't want them cluttering up the lobby." "The back exit?" Brooke choked. "By the dumpsters." "Fitting, isn't it?" I smiled. "Service entrance only for staff. And since you treated the staff like garbage, you can leave with it. The walk of shame is a long one in the Marshall room. The ballroom is 100 feet long, lined with mirrors." Brooke and Robert had to walk the entire length of it, flanked by my security team. Brooke tried to maintain some dignity at first, tossing her hair and glaring at the guests. But nobody met her eyes. The investors were suddenly very interested in their shoes. The board members were checking their phones. The social exile was instantaneous. In this industry, you can survive bankruptcy, you can survive divorce, but you cannot survive being publicly humiliated by the help. As they passed table 4, I saw Marcus, the CFO, watching them go. He caught my eye, raised his glass of free scotch in a subtle toast. Marcus was a survivor. He knew which way the wind was blowing, and right now, it was blowing a hurricane-force gale in my direction. When the double doors at the back of the room swung shut behind them, a collective exhale swept through the room. The tension broke. I stood there in the center of the floor, wine still dripping from my apron. "Miguel," I called out. Miguel hurried over, looking at me with wide, awestruck eyes. "Yes, Miss Vance, get a mop for this spill," I said, "and then bring out the dessert. And tell the band to play something that isn't techno-jazz. Maybe some Sinatra." "Yes, ma'am," he practically saluted. I turned to the room. "Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The disruption has been handled." I walked out of the ballroom and into the kitchen. As soon as the door swung shut, the staff erupted. The chefs started banging their ladles on the counters. The dishwashers cheered. The waiters clapped. It was a standing ovation from the people who mattered. "Did you see her face?" One of the line cooks yelled. "She looked like she swallowed a lemon." "You're a legend, boss," Miguel shouted. I leaned against the stainless steel prep table and let out a long breath. My hands were shaking slightly, now that the adrenaline was fading. I untied the stained apron and tossed it into the laundry bin. All right, I said, suppressing a smile. back to work. Have 300 soufflés to plate. Let's show them what actual service looks like. I went to the manager's office, my office, and sat down. I pulled up the security feed of the back alley. On the grainy black and white screen, I saw Robert and Brooke standing by the dumpsters. It was raining lightly. Brooke was shivering, her phone in her hand, furiously typing. Robert was leaning against the brick wall, head in his hands. I watched them for a minute, just a minute. It wasn't joy I felt, it was satisfaction. The kind you feel when a column of numbers finally balances out to zero. I picked up the phone and dialed the front desk. Yes, Miss Vance, call a tow truck, I said. There's a limousine blocking the loading dock, have it removed. But isn't that Mr. Roberts' car? Not anymore, I said. It's an unauthorized vehicle on private property. Tow it. I hung up. The gala continued inside. I could hear the faint strains of Fly Me to the Moon drifting through the walls. The guests were happy. The staff was happy. The parasite had been excised, but I wasn't done. The eviction from the venue was just the opening move. Now came the blockade. A week later, the fallout was spectacular. The Tribune ran the headline, Gala gone wrong, CEO's daughter evicted by mystery landlord. The stock price of Robert's company dipped 14% in 2 days. Vision was being questioned. I was back in my tailored suits, working out of the renovated office at the Marshall Room. I had officially registered Ursa Major LLC as a hospitality management group. My phone was ringing off the hook with vendors wanting to work with the woman who kicked out the influencers. Then came the email. It wasn't from Brooke. She had gone radio silent on social media, a miracle in itself. It was from a junior assistant at their firm, dressed to the events manager of the Grandview Terrace. The Grandview Terrace was the only other venue in Chicago with the capacity and prestige to host their upcoming emergency shareholder meeting. They needed to do damage control, and they needed a big, impressive room to do it in. The email was polite, desperate, requesting availability for immediate booking. Budget is flexible. I smiled. I swiveled my chair around to look at the map of Chicago on my wall. I had put pins in the properties I had acquired stakes in over the last 4 months. The Marshall Room was one. The Grandview Terrace was another. I didn't own the Grandview outright. It was too expensive. But I had bought a controlling interest in the operating company that managed their bookings. I was the silent partner who had final say on the calendar. Sarah, I called out to my assistant, not the lawyer, a new hire, bright kid. Reply to this inquiry. She looked at the screen. One from your old company? Yes. Do you want me to tell them we're booked? No, I said, tapping my pen on the desk. Tell them we have availability. Sarah looked confused. You want to let them in? Tell them we have availability, I repeated. But due to market volatility and risk assessment based on recent public events, the rental rate has been adjusted. Adjusted to what? Triple the standard rate, I said, plus a non-refundable security deposit of $100,000, and a clause that requires prepayment for all damages, estimated at an additional $50,000. Oh, and one more thing. Yes, tell them the venue requires final approval on all event speakers and agendas to ensure alignment with our brand values. Sarah grinned. It was a shark's grin. She was learning, sending it now. They accepted within the hour. They had no choice. Were desperate to show the shareholders they were still in control, still capable of securing a prestige location. I signed the contract as E. Vance, Director of Strategic Partnerships. They still didn't know the extent of my reach. They thought the Marshall Room was a fluke, a one-off disaster. They didn't realize the web I had spun. When the check cleared, a massive, bloated sum that went straight into my acquisition fund, used it to buy a 5% stake in their linen supplier. Then I negotiated a new contract that raised their laundry prices by 20%. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every time they tried to move, they bumped into me. Every time they tried to book a caterer, I had an exclusive contract. Every time they tried to hire a temp agency, I had already hired the best staff. Brooke was reportedly having meltdowns in the office daily. Robert was rumored to be looking for a buyer for the company, but no one wanted to touch it with Brooke attached. They were trapped in a hospitality maze, and I was the Minotaur. 1 month later, the Marshall Room was glowing, but not with neon gels or cyberpunk nonsense. It was lit by hundreds of beeswax candles, casting a warm, golden light over the restored oak paneling. I was hosting my own party, the Ursa Major launch. There were no influencers or no press releases. The guest list was curated with surgical precision. It included the best executive chefs in the city, the most reliable vendors, the heads of the housekeeping unions, and the silent investors who had backed me. And of course, my staff. Miguel was there, not serving, but sitting at a table with his wife, wearing a suit I had bought for him. The kitchen crew was there, dining on the food they usually cooked. It was a celebration of the industry, not the ego. I stood at the podium wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet. I looked out at the room. Hospitality, I said into the microphone, is not about servitude. It is about stewardship. It is about creating a space where people feel cared for. But respect is a two-way street. You cannot demand service while denying dignity. The applause was warm and genuine. It felt like coming home. As the band struck up a jazz standard, I walked through the room, shaking hands, thanking people. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Marcus, the CFO of my old company. He had resigned 3 days ago. A leaner, he said, looking tired but relieved. This is incredible. Hello, Marcus, I said. Enjoying the unemployment line, he laughed. Better than the firing line. Robert is stepping down. The board is voting to oust Brooke next week. They're selling the company to Neo Stay for parts. I know, I said. I'm buying the catering division. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. You played the long game, El. You really did. I didn't play a game, Marcus, I said, sipping my martini. I just enforced the rules. I walked toward the window that looked out onto the street. The rain had turned to snow, large flakes drifting down against the glass. Outside, standing on the sidewalk, was a figure. It was Brooke. She was wearing a trench coat, looking in through the large bay window. She looked cold. She looked small. She was watching the warmth, the laughter, the golden light of the world she had been evicted from. Our eyes met through the glass. She didn't glare. She didn't scream. She just looked, hungry, like a child watching a family eat dinner from the street. She had all the money in the world, but she had no seat at the table. I didn't wave. I didn't smirk. I didn't hold up a loser sign. That would be beneath me. That would be something she would do. Simply reached out and pulled the velvet curtain shut. Block by block, I erased her view. The last thing I saw was her reflection in the glass, ghost-like, before the heavy fabric cut her off completely. I turned back to my party, to my people. Miguel, I called out softly. Champagne for table 6. And make sure the glasses are clean. Spotless, Miss Vance, he winked. Good, I said, taking a sip of my drink. We have standards to uphold. I walked back into the warmth, leaving the cold outside where it belonged.
And that's the story. Take care of yourselves out there. The world's unpredictable enough.